Welcome to Skills for Life, a podcast about high-demand jobs that are shaping future opportunities. This show is brought to you by the North Shore Schools Foundation. I'm Kira Dorian, your host and a North Shore mom. Let's get started. Today on the show, we have Brian Tuskan, who is the Senior Director and Chief Security Officer at Microsoft. And the industry that we're talking about is global physical security. Brian, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm excited to talk to you.
Well, Kira, thank you for having me on your podcast. I'm excited to talk to you also.
Let's start with, tell me what that even means. I mean, I'm a podcast host, so when I hear the words global physical security, I literally have no idea what that means. So let's just start with what is that? What is your job? Tell us about it.
Well, many people confuse overall security with cybersecurity, physical security. They're two different disciplines. So I wanted to just talk to your podcast audience specifically on the physical security discipline. And when you think of physical security, a lot of people think of guarding, where you would have a security guard with a bunch of keys, shaking doorknobs and helping people out, which is a huge component of protecting a corporation such as Microsoft or any private physical area. There's a huge component to physical security when you think about law enforcement. They go hand in hand from a partnership perspective. So to give you an idea, what I'm responsible for is all of the physical security for the corporation of Microsoft globally. So we operate in over 190 countries. We have close to 800 physical sites around the globe. And my team is responsible to protect the life safety of our employees, our guests, our customers, to ensure that our physical locations are safe and secure so our employees can do their jobs. This would also include travel safety, security, and anything that we can do to ensure life safety is job number one for our group, so our employees can go out there and create the best experiences and software for productivity.
Wow, that is really interesting. Talk about a job that I didn't even think about and yet is so incredibly important. I love that. So how did you get there? Tell me a little bit about the career path you took, bearing in mind that our students might be thinking of following that path.
So my path came through law enforcement. And if I recall back from when I was a young student, I was heavily into sports. I loved baseball, football. Those were my primary sports, wrestling. And so because I was in athletics, it exposed me to teamwork, working in teams. And I've always had a great respect and admiration for the law enforcement profession. So even when I was a student, I'd work at fast food and the cops would come in and I'd strike up a conversation. And I always had a fascination to work in law enforcement. And so when I graduated, I put myself through college, and I was taking criminal justice, which is a degree that could help you prepare for life in law enforcement, whether it's public safety law enforcement in municipal or state or federal, but not necessarily required to become a cop. You can have a myriad of other degrees or experiences to get into law enforcement. And I'll talk about that a little later. But my path led to joining the police department at age 23. And it was at the Honolulu Police Department, which a lot of people do not know. In the city and county of Honolulu, there's only one police agency, and there are over 2,000 officers. It's much bigger than Seattle Police. And I got in at 23, went through the police academy, and was a commissioned officer. I think I was 24 when I got commissioned, and started my law enforcement career working a bunch of different jobs, specialty jobs. One of the coolest jobs after patrol was an ATV, all-terrain vehicle officer on Waikiki Beach. So I was the cop patrolling the beach on an all-terrain vehicle, one of the coolest jobs ever. And then I got on a full-time SWAT team, special tactics team. And I did that for a few years before applying for and lateraling over to the City of Redmond Police Department, which was in the early 90s, where I wanted to move my family from Hawaii to Washington State. For 8 years with the City of Redmond, I worked in patrol. I worked as an undercover detective. I worked as a generalist detective for most of my time, doing all kinds of interesting crimes and investigations, which in late 2000, I was recruited by Microsoft. So the City of Redmond, obviously Microsoft is one of the biggest companies in Redmond. I built a relationship with the security team that they had there just through cases and investigations. And they asked if I was interested in coming on as an investigator. So my career trajectory went from law enforcement, did that for almost 13 years, to corporate security, which is a complete different discipline. And it has evolved over the 21 years I've been at Microsoft to a much needed profession. So outside of law enforcement or traditional military, which where you would think you would need a law enforcement background or military background to get into the corporate security discipline, that's not really valid or necessary today. So if you're a young student looking to get into the private sector security arena, public safety is not required or military is not required because there are degrees out there, there are programs, there's certifications that you could learn about the discipline in the industry to become a security practitioner and a security professional. And one organization, in my opinion, there are a lot of organizations out there to get you up to speed on the corporate security profession. But the best one, in my opinion, is ASIS International. And what they have is thousands, I think about 60,000 members of security practitioners that are members. And they have what they call the Young Security Professionals organization. So I would recommend you go to their site, look at options to learn about this profession and see if it's something you would be interested in after you graduate from high school, or look at college degrees that would fit within the discipline. And I can talk more about what that may be.
Well, if you could share why a student might want to go down this road as opposed to law enforcement. Like, what are some of the benefits or things that students could be looking at in themselves to say, hey, I'm interested in the general security and physical security realm. What would you say to students, trying to decide which path to take? Why would this path be of interest to students versus the law enforcement path?
I would say the main two would be just general interest in the corporate security, private security discipline, because it's so much broader than what you would find in law enforcement. I would say that's number one. And you could get started early in your early 20s in the profession, which it takes years to build the competency and muscle in the private security sector versus doing 20 plus years as a police officer, retiring, and then coming into the industry, where I actually left mid-career. So I did not officially retire. It was kind of like a retirement, but only 12 and a half years where I came into the private sector after law enforcement. The second category I would throw in why someone would not go into public safety or law enforcement is just the barriers to entry, very high, from physical fitness requirements. So some people might have some sort of disability that they can't even get out of the gate. They can't get through that first piece. It could be maybe their eyesight isn't good enough, or the physical fitness requirements to become a law enforcement officer may be something that they can't achieve. And so they'll decide on a private sector career. And I'll give you an example. One of my directors working for me, he had a injury to his leg, which prevented him from being able to do all of the obstacle courses and requirements in law enforcement. So he just couldn't apply. So he decided after college to join the corporate security profession, and he's been doing it for the last 26 years now. Highly successful. So those are the two categories I would say just off the top of my head.
That is so helpful. I really appreciate that. I think there are a lot of students that need to have that information, and here's a path where you can still pursue a passion and not have that barrier. I think that's fantastic. So you mentioned that it's already transformed a lot as a career over the past years that you've been in it. How do you see it transforming in the next 5 to 10 years?
The biggest transformation I see in this industry is the integration of the physical security and the logical security. So the cyber side, where they go hand in hand, which requires strong partnerships. And also on the technology, innovation, use of artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning to do our job quicker, better, cheaper, to identify risks will be the next 5 to 10 years to help us identify threats almost immediately when they happen. And then we can respond effectively. So to give you an example, if I am responsible for the life safety of all Microsoft employees and guests and suppliers that work here, I need to have a really good understanding of the threat vectors and profiles of events that are occurring all over the world where we operate, and how can we quickly mitigate or plan to mitigate threats or crises to our locations. And the number one threats that occur are usually weather related, right? Or some sort of natural disaster that you have to prepare for, plan, train, and address. But there's also man-made crises. And as you can see at the recording now, you have the unrest that's happening in Eastern Europe. And so how do we ensure our employees are safe from harm, where you could be in actual war zones, right? And so it's well above and beyond the current scope someone would have at a police agency, where if you work for a police department, even if it's as big as New York or LA, it's specific to that city. Whereas in the corporate security world, it could be as big as the entire globe of what I'm responsible for. And so over the years, I've had the experience of working in almost every conceivable region of the world with security professional and practitioners, many who have had law enforcement and military background, but now are security professionals within our discipline in Microsoft and the technology field.
So if I'm a student, I'm listening to this, I'm inspired, I'm like, I want to do that. That sounds really cool, because by the way, it really does. What do I do? What are some key tangible takeaways for our students that might go, this is something I'm interested in? Who should they be following? What steps should they be taking now? What would you tell them for the future?
One, go to asisinternational.org and just review what's out there. You don't necessarily have to join it, but they have a lot of free pages that you can look at what the industry is about. The other thing I would say is join LinkedIn. Microsoft owns LinkedIn, so just full disclosure. But I would join LinkedIn, which is more of a professional platform to meet other professionals out there, and follow me. I do a lot of blogs and podcasts. I talk about life after law enforcement. I literally have a website called cop2corporate.com, where I give free insights and advice to police officers looking to work in the private sector. So just that alone shows how big of an industry private security is. I have a bunch of cops and federal law enforcement agents that want to come into my industry. So coaching, mentoring is big. If you can connect with somebody in the industry and see if you could chat with them. Obviously, I am unable to talk to everyone that reaches out to me for one-on-one coaching, hence the cop2corporate.com website. I've got tons of videos on there where I interview a lot of law enforcement and military that have transitioned to the private sector. And so that could help your students gauge if this is something that they're interested in pursuing as a career. And I can tell you, it's one of the most rewarding and fulfilling careers that's out there.
Brian, this is so helpful. Thank you so much for just giving us a peek into this really interesting sector that, like I said, I had never given a second thought to. And yet look how important that work is that you're doing to keep all those employees around the globe safe. I think that's really incredible. So thank you for being with us. Listeners, if you're interested, go check out ASIS. Is that right, Brian?
Yes.
Okay, and go to cop2corporate.com to find out more about the work and more about Brian. Follow Brian on LinkedIn. And Brian, thanks so much for being with us today.
My pleasure, Kira. Thank you.
We hope you'll join us again, and remember to hit subscribe to be notified about upcoming episodes. Join the conversation on our Facebook page, Build Skills for Life. That's Build Skills, the number 4, and then the word life. To learn more about the North Shore Schools Foundation, visit us at northshoreschoolsfoundation.org. Thanks for listening.